Welcome to Pitch Club. I'm Jennifer Arthur with AngelMD, and I would love it if any of you who are joining us at Pitch Club for the first time tonight want to click on any emoji that you feel represents your excitement about tonight. Go ahead and do that so we can see the new people that are here. In a moment, I'm going to turn this over to our producer and host, Dr. Katie Richardson, but just want to introduce you to a few things. First of all, we are fortunate to have a special guest host tonight, Dr. Payal Kohli, and she is a member of our Cardiology Clinical Advisory Board. Dr. Kohli is a non-invasive cardiologist with interests and expertise in advanced echocardiography, nuclear cardiology, prevention, and women's heart disease. She served as a section editor of JACC and an assistant editor of JACC Imaging, and she's also a medical expert on local news channels as well as national television shows. So we're fortunate to have her here to share her expertise in the event. Next, I would like to take a moment to share a few things about AngelMD and to recognize a few individuals. Over the last 18 months, some of you have participated in some of our training and educational workshops and courses. We are excited to announce that this is about to go to a whole new level as we launch AngelMD Academy in late March. Keep an eye out for our courses and workshops for physician entrepreneurs, advisors, and investors, with the goal of giving everyone more tools to improve their effectiveness. We will be making some official announcements through our newsletter in the coming weeks, so you are hearing about it here first. Next, I want to call your attention to our Clinical Advisory Board. As I said, Dr. Kohli is one of our members. This is a group of hundreds of clinicians that's the heart of the AngelMD network. These physicians participate in evaluations of new technologies and startups through an industry-leading artificial intelligence engine. If you are a family office or a venture capital firm, contact us to learn how the analysis and reports from our Clinical Advisory Board can benefit your investing process. Clinicians with interest in learning more should check out the links provided in our follow-up email tomorrow. We will also have an AngelMD table, and I'm happy to answer any questions there too at the end of this event. By now, most of you should be receiving our daily briefing called Vital Signs. This comes to AngelMD members via email every morning and covers AngelMD startups and other industry information relevant for investors and entrepreneurs in this space. If you aren't receiving this email briefing, we'll have a link in tomorrow's follow-up email. And if you're not already a member of AngelMD, if you do register with us, then you will automatically be getting this email. If you're an entrepreneur or an investor in a startup, ask if the company is putting their best foot forward with their outward-facing materials like logos, websites, social media, and video. We monitor thousands of startups, and we can attest to the fact that about 99% have inadequate digital assets. Alpha Creative is a new marketing agency focused solely on healthcare startups. Again, we'll provide their information in the follow-up email tomorrow if you want to have them give you an assessment of your company and your needs. Before we begin, I do want to thank tonight's sponsor, BioWise Capital. The BioWise Fund 1 has been an enormous success, so they have now launched BioWise Fund 2. Through the end of the month, so another week and a half, individuals can participate in the fund. After March 1st, they will be working with institutional investors only. The managing partner will be hosting a live webinar later this week for those interested, and the information will be in tomorrow's email. Without further ado, I want to kick off our evening of cardiology innovation and welcome Dr. Katie Richardson to take over. Dr. Richardson?
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here and to have Dr. Kohli with us tonight, along with three amazing companies that will be pitching for you tonight. One exciting thing that I'm also going to repeat at the end, the next two pitch clubs, in addition to tonight's event, really are going to focus on the specialty of cardiology. So even though it says radiology and interventional radiology, we're going to have many cardiology companies that are in that space. Same thing with surgery and cardiothoracic surgery. So if this is an area where you like to spend your time or learn more about the technology in this space, we encourage you to join us over the next 6 weeks to see what else we have in store. Lots of excitement coming. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker of the evening. So Daniel Halpern is here with us tonight, and he is the CEO of Crystalline Medical. Daniel, thank you so much for being here tonight. We'll go ahead and get your slides up and let you begin. All right, we're all set to go. Daniel, I'll let you go ahead and take over.
All right, thank you, Katie. I'd like to take a moment to thank AngelMD for allowing us to present, and each of you for joining us tonight. We are a Bay Area company focused on developing and commercializing our ViewPath vascular access guidance system, which is a platform that was custom designed for safe, rapid, and intuitive vascular access for interventional cardiology, tonight's topic, and for many other interventional specialties. Next. Large vessel venous and arterial access is a significant need and represents a huge market with over 11 million procedures performed annually in the US alone. The global market is estimated at 2 to 3 times this. There is large variability in access guidance, contributing to significant complication rates between 3 and 19%, leading to over $3 billion of unreimbursed care, or $10,000 to $50,000 per episode of unreimbursed expense, even for minor complications. Ultrasound guidance is considered best practice for any large vessel access and has been strongly recommended by numerous medical societies and government agencies in the US and internationally for over 20 years. Despite this, use of ultrasound to guide vascular access varies, average usage rates of 30 to 60%, and in many specialties is significantly lower. There are inherent limitations of existing ultrasound technology for vascular access. Next again. Current ultrasound technology uses off-the-shelf imaging probes that are designed for a wide variety of imaging applications. They tend to be large and typically involve a two-handed operation in which the user manually aligns the needle into the imaging plane, either along or across the ultrasound beam. Such manual alignment of the needle requires substantial skill. The large size of the probe makes it clunky and unwieldy, making such fine alignments awkward. When placing the needle along the ultrasound beam, the operator has to align the needle into a beam that is often as narrow as 2 millimeters. Similarly, when placing the needle across the ultrasound beam, it's difficult to locate the needle tip, and the operator has to constantly scan back and forth until they visualize the needle tip. Some of the challenges of conventional ultrasound are summarized on the right. Next. Our platform, ViewPath, on the other hand, is custom designed for vascular access and has 4 key features that enable operators of all skill levels, from novice through expert, to achieve safe and intuitive vascular access. Start. Our optimized ergonomics allows the probe to fit in one hand and makes it easily maneuverable. Our integrated device pre-aligns the needle so that the needle is always automatically placed in the ultrasound beam, and thus manipulation is not required. This substantially reduces training time. Our wide-angle forward view configuration allows advancing the needle under real-time vision and advancing and observing guide wire deployment. Our user interface guides the user to the target with lines to show the needle and needle path. Finally, our needle release feature allows an operator to continue the procedure uninterrupted. These features, and importantly, our low overall cost of ownership, positions us very competitively with currently marketed point-of-care ultrasound systems. We deliver easy access to complex anatomy. Next. Our initial user experiences demonstrated first in phantom, then animal and human femoral artery and vein studies, demonstrated average training time of 5 minutes, and average time from image to access was 5 to 10 seconds. Importantly, after the brief initial training, the actual access procedure was performed equivalently between novice and expert operators. Separately, Stanford Emergency Department residents, after first-time use of Sonocyte and ViewPath, overwhelmingly preferred ViewPath, 73% excellent or good ease of use, compared with Sonocyte, 9% good and 0% excellent. We expect these early results to be more fully demonstrated in larger user preference studies planned for later this year. Next. Good. We have received over $5 million in non-dilutive NIH funding to develop our technology, along with over $1 million in seed funding from Angels, Maryland State Technology Development Corporation, and family funds. This funding enabled us to create, test, and iterate successive working prototypes, develop and then test a clinical version in experimental animal and first-in-human studies. We have multiple issued and pending patents in the US and internationally. We received FDA 510(k) clearance for our first product. Looking forward, we are raising funds to continue user preference testing in approximately 200 patients in real-world scenarios and to use that input to make further upgrades to the hardware, software, and the plastic components. We are also one of a handful of ultrasound vascular guidance systems selected to participate in evaluation this year by the US Army to determine optimal systems for military-based clinical trials or as a preferred system for use by the armed forces. Also listed above are just a few of the strategics that we target or with whom we have already initiated conversations. Next. Our team brings together decades of experience in developing, financing, manufacturing, launching, commercializing, and exiting imaging and interventional device opportunities. I just want to mention our founder, Ted Abraham, is clinical chief of cardiology at UCSF and has been involved in clinical ultrasound for over 20 years. Thank you. We're happy to take questions.
Dan, thank you so much. We're excited to have you here. I'm going to start with Pyle, and I'm just going to ask Dr. Coley to give us some initial thoughts about this new device, and then she's also going to ask you our first few questions.
Super.
Dan, thank you so much for that presentation. And I was very interested and excited to see some of your data, actually. So as a non-invasive cardiologist, someone who doesn't do these procedures a lot, I was very happy to see this kind of a device come out there. But I think my initial reaction to this was that in experienced hands, for example, a vascular surgeon, an interventional cardiologist, an electrophysiologist, is the added cost necessarily offset by the ease of use, because many of those, as you know, are so used to vascular access that they are very comfortable with the two-handed using the Sonocyte device, which also has other applications. So I think that that may be something to consider in the sense of what would be the right location for this type of a device. Would it be a training hospital, an emergency room where they don't do a lot of vascular access, not necessarily the cath lab or the EP lab where we're routinely accessing the blood vessels?
Excellent question. We are teeing up a larger 200 plus patient user preference study later this year. And we will look at structural heart, we'll look at electrophysiology, lead placement, we'll look at interventional neuro, for example, coil deposition in an ischemic stroke patient. Time matters. And the expert may not be in the room. He or she may be scrubbing in or maybe down the hall. And we've demonstrated that lesser skilled, mid-level professionals can do this rapidly.
Great.
So,
and
yeah.
I think that's great, because I think, to your point, the application of this could be more widespread in terms of vascular access if it became more simplified. But I was also curious, looking at your data set, you talked about time to vascular access, but how about other clinical outcomes like vascular dissections, risk of bleeding, pseudoaneurysm formation? Have you looked at those? Are you planning to look at those?
Well, those are all components of complication risk. And it would be a mistake to suggest that it's all about guidance. But I would, I have been told by some folks in the malpractice community that it's odd that there have been decades of data and guidelines around the use of ultrasound, yet it isn't 100%, not even in the cath lab.
Great, Dan. I have several questions from our audience as well that I want to make sure that we get to a few of them. One is kind of the types of access that this can be used for. Is it only for lower extremity access? What is the smallest vessel size you can access? And lastly, is this compatible with the micropuncture technique? So those are three questions from our cardiologists that are here with us tonight.
I'm glad, I'll answer all of the above. I'm glad about the question about micropuncture because a great example of the problem in the cath lab is in the peripheral artery disease. If you have highly calcified lesion, hard as a rock, not only do you want to be certain you're in the right spot, but you want to navigate around that hard rock. And oftentimes those microcatheters are in fact used in peripheral cases as well. So in terms of locations, we're talking femoral, we're talking jugular, we're talking subclavian. And if I can use a prop here, we have a 10 millimeter growing to about 14 millimeter transducer diameter, which is dramatically smaller than the next nearest competitor, allowing you to get underneath the clavicle and really have an advantage in following the needle tip all the way through and avoiding all the dangerous things that could be a problem. So that is the existing product call sites, or I should say access sites. We have a second generation product in development, which is small bore and radial.
Great. And Dan, we have so many great questions that are in the Q&A right now, but unfortunately we are out of time. I'm going to encourage those of you that didn't have your questions answered during this Q&A to join us after all of the pitches in our networking lounge, because that will be another opportunity to talk to Dan and the rest of the Crystalline medical team about getting answered all of these additional questions. Thank you so much, Dan, for being here tonight. We really appreciate hearing about this new device.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to, for those of you, if it's your first time here tonight, I'm going to ask one thing of you, and that is that we like to give feedback to our presenters. And we're going to put a poll, a link to a poll in our chat. This is called Poll Everywhere. So AngelMD Operations just put that in there. If you go ahead and click on that, it'll bring up another window that I'm going to encourage you to keep up for the duration of the event. Right now, you can answer the questions for Dan and Crystalline, but we're going to have you give feedback to each one of the presenters tonight. So please, as many of you as possible, we would love to give feedback to this team. Go ahead and click on Poll Everywhere, and I'll keep reminding you throughout the event. All right. Well, without further ado, we're going to move on to our second presenter of the evening. And we have Chip Horgan with us tonight, and he is the CEO of Medical Ingenuities. Chip, thank you so much for being here.
I want to first thank AngelMD for having us and everyone who's participating tonight. Medical Ingenuities was developed by me, Chip Horgan, as the founder and the CEO. We've been focused on the interventional radiology market, and more in particular, which is very interesting following Daniel, We're the radial closure after a procedure, a cardiac catheterization done in the cardiac cath lab after a stent or an angioplasty is done. And it's to get patent hemostasis at the end of a cardiac catheterization. And more importantly, the key there is patent hemostasis, to stop the bleeding, allow the healing to take place, but not to compromise the vessels below because you're applying pressure. And we'll describe that a little bit more. But the biggest problem that we see in the cardiac cath lab with radial access is that the current bands at the end of the procedure do not achieve patent hemostasis. They achieve hemostasis, which means they stop the bleeding, but this results in numerous complications. Radial artery occlusion rates between 8 to 12%, hematomas between 3 to 6%, rebleeding events between 3 to 6% also. And this creates greater than a $1 billion economic burden to the healthcare system. But more importantly, the burden that takes place within the nursing staff. They have to adjust these bands every 15 to 20 minutes to try and get patent hemostasis and prevent those complications, as well as that leads to longer times in the recovery room and possibly staying the night at the hospital, which is not a financial benefit to the hospital itself. And this is all caused by the existing radial compression bands not being able to get patent hemostasis. And Dr. Kerrigan quoted as best saying, "This is our biggest problem with radial closure. We are just guessing that we are achieving patent hemostasis." And the key with this is that what we did at Medical Ingenuities, we developed the patent hemostasis band to simplify patent hemostasis by removing the guesswork with real-time feedback, by providing a microdoppler probe incorporated into the pH band. And if you look in the first picture here, you can see the pH band on a patient's arm. You can see the little square microdoppler probe, as well as the sheath. What we actually do is we inject 15 cc's of air in the second picture. This actually is more of a tourniquet type of thing at this point, which we completely occlude the vessel below. We then pull the sheath out, and you can see we still have occlusion, but at this point you have hemostasis, just like all the other bands. In slide 4, which really differentiates us from the others, we start releasing air slowly until the vessel opens up. Once the vessel opens up, you're getting a ping, a sound wave sent down through that microdoppler. Once it hits the blood cells, it actually rebounds back and will give an audible signal to the physician, allowing them to know they've achieved patent hemostasis and they stop releasing some of the air. So the science behind patent hemostasis is you need blood flow for the healing to take place. As you can see, you need the platelets and other factors to get to the injured area and begin the healing process. SCI, the Society of Cardiovascular Angiography and Intervention, who puts best practice techniques out or recommendations out there, says you need to achieve patent hemostasis after a radial procedure. And the reason that they say this is that in all the clinical studies, we know that if you can achieve patent hemostasis, you can reduce complications by well over 90%. We also know that 50 to 80% of the patients are released from the hospital without any real confirmation of patent hemostasis. The gold standard in cardiology, as well as a lot of the hospital, has been a Doppler. With the patent hemostasis band, we're using a simple Doppler through sound, which will indicate the direction of the blood flow to make sure that we have patent hemostasis. There's a more complex Doppler out there that will give you sound and a visual picture, which will indicate direction, blood flow, and a few other things that we'll look at a later date to get into those. But the key is we know that if you use Doppler to follow up on patients before they're released from the hospital, you will see a 2 to 4 times higher rate of radial artery occlusion rates. And the reason for this is the current techniques do not and are not as accurate as they should be, which is why we're seeing a radial artery occlusion rate around 8% worldwide. So a little data comparison, because we did receive FDA approval and we just started doing cases, but we did a small feasibility study here a year ago. And what we actually saw in that is we were able to achieve patent hemostasis. We got the antegrade flow we wanted. We had 0 complications and reduced the compression time down to 1 hour. Now, in a meta-analysis of all the studies of 66 studies over 30,000 patients, you'll see that they did not get patent hemostasis or antegrade flow, but the nurse had to adjust the band every 15 to 20 minutes, causing a lot of extra work on the nurse. And the radial artery occlusion rate in all those studies is between 1 and 33%, which is quite high. They didn't look at rebleeding and hematomas, and the average time to hemostasis was 2 to 6 hours. And the 2 most recent studies with the gold standard in the industry, the TR band, you can see that once again, did not achieve patent hemostasis, no documentation on flow, but the complications are the interesting point. Their focus was to reduce radial artery occlusion rates, which they were able to do to get that down to about 0 and 1%. but they even state that they had to do meticulous use of Doppler and drug cocktails, and that the average person would not be able to do it. But they do multiple adjustments between 4 and 7%. They also had rebleeding events between 5 and 67%, hematomas at 18 and 7%, and their time to hemostasis was 1 hour to 3 hours. So our timeline is we started in 2017, where we finalized the development of the pH band. We did the human feasibility study we just talked about, had our 2 patents, raised a little bit of money, moved on to 2020, where we at the end got FDA approval. Another small seed round. We started building up the manufacturing operations during the last couple of years. We've built a sales pipeline of over 14 million potential sales, tied up in value analysis committees at various hospitals across the country. We also raised another 515,000. This year, we've started developing a comparative study of over 1,800 patients, which will be a revenue-generating study within Ascension. We're currently in the market. We just did our first 2 cases, or four cases yesterday, 4 perfect cases. We'll submit for a pedal indication as well as some more filings. We're in the middle of a $1 million raise, which we've raised 565,000, and looking for an exit sometime in 2024. We have a very strong team with over 100 years of medical device development and sales and marketing experience, bringing products to market, and an extremely strong advisory board, really of radiologists across the country that are who's who, well published, trained in this, a lot of podium presence, as well as a key nurse that sits on the SCI guidelines, as well as works with the AIM radio board. So with that, I'll thank you for your time and open it up to any questions.
Great. Thank you, Chip. Thanks for being here. And we really appreciate your presentation tonight. I'm going to begin by letting Dr. Coley again say a few words and start with a few questions.
Okay.
Somebody had to do that. So
Yep.
I said, thank you so much for that presentation. And in the era of radial first, which we're in very much right now, I think it is really important to reduce vascular complications when it comes to the radial artery. So I commend you for designing this. I did have a couple of specific questions. The first was, tell me about the intellectual product here, because clinically, we're not seeing nearly that many complications happening with our TR band and most of the occlusion devices that we have now. Now, there are some complications that happen as a result of lack of collateral flow, which I think this device would circumvent. But what would you be designing as the intellectual product here? Because it seems like an upgrade to the pre-existing closure device that we have, but not necessarily a new concept in and of itself.
Right. It is an upgrade. And there's actually right now we've got 2 patents, which really it's a dual band in order for a single operator to use this device to be able to remove the sheath and get patent hemostasis. The key is that a lot of these complications get lost in the mix because a patient 2 to 3 days later has hand numbness, pain. They don't go back to the cardiologist. They go back to the primary care or the vascular surgeon. And actually, there was just a recent study on that where the vascular surgeons are seeing a 6.6% radial complication rate with hand pain. So it kind of gets lost in that scenario. But we do have quite a bit of intellectually around it in the fact of you have to have a dual band in order for one-person operation, as well as the band has a split in it so that it lines up perfectly, so that it makes it very simple for an individual to use it. And the way that you've got the Doppler, the sheath, as well as the pressure all lined up for perfect access. So that's where all the patents revolve around it, to be able to keep others out of this little space. And I guess it's really not that little if you look at the size of the market anymore. It's actually very large.
And my other question would be that the first in human studies that you did were presumably on healthy volunteers, but how does this band perform in those on anticoagulants or those who might be on antiplatelet agents, or, right after a large dose of heparin is administered? Will it still achieve adequate hemostasis?
So we actually just did 4 patients on Monday, which is our first commercial patients. So they were all, one was an intervention, the other 3 were diagnostic. So that's right in line with you want. Our numbers were exactly the same. 1 hour compression time We had, perfect hemostasis at closure and at the release of the patient. We actually do follow the patient for that hour. Once they take the band off, we check again to make sure that we have patent hemostasis. So it works fine. It worked fine in all those 18 patients that we did at Rex Healthcare in our feasibility study also. So the anticoagulation wasn't a problem. And I know there were patients on, various anticoagulants without any issues at this point.
Great. We're going to take a few questions from our audience as well. One from one of our other cardiology clinical advisory board members. Does the Doppler probe integrate with current workflow? Is there RN training that has to occur for monitoring this, or is it the physician that becomes responsible for monitoring the Doppler? So talk a little bit more about the workflow.
Well, the key is there's not much real workflow in the fact that it takes a minute to a minute and a half to put the device on, in which the Doppler is applied underneath the band. So once you get patent hemostasis, you don't have to monitor the patient. And that's what we saw at Rex in the 4 patients yesterday, where we actually took the band off or took the Doppler off. And then we followed up just for the heck of following up at a year, just to prove that the patent hemostasis maintained through the recovery period. So there's really no real training. Most people in the cath lab know how to use a Doppler system. It's an audible Doppler, pocket Doppler. So it's not very hard. And that was one of the things going back to the patent. It's perfectly lined up so that when you put it in the Doppler underneath the band, it actually lines up right behind the sheath, which means you're sitting right on top of the artery. So you automatically pick up the signal.
Great. And one more question for you, and this is a little bit goes to your competition. With more and more distal radial being used, how much market share will this device have, do you believe?
Well, the key is that you want to get patent hemostasis. We have the ability to actually make this a gold standard, that you need to get patent hemostasis. And the only way to get that is through a Doppler, because that vessel actually branches off into 2 vessels right below the thumb. So you've got a very small area to actually get that patent hemostasis signal. So we have an opportunity to capture a large percentage of this market.
Great. Chip, thank you so much again for being here tonight. I know we have additional questions in our Q&A. And again, I would encourage all of you to continue the conversation and networking after we finish with our third presenter. But thank you to Chip and Medical Ingenuities for being here tonight. I'm going to give another reminder that I would love for you to fill out the poll. Again, if you go in your chat, if you click on the poll everywhere link, this allows our audience to give feedback to our companies, our founders, and our presenters tonight. And really, this is information that they want from you. So please take a minute and fill out the poll for Medical Ingenuities. And while we're doing that, I'm going to introduce our third speaker. So we have Dr. Utku Gulan tonight, who is the co-founder and CEO of High-D Imaging. Welcome, Utku. We're glad to have you tonight, and we are going to get your slides pulled up. One of the things to know about Utku is he's joining us from Switzerland tonight, so in the middle of the night there, and looking quite bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Katie, for the introduction. And I would like to thank AngelMD for having us. And it's a pleasure to be part of this fantastic event. Who we are High-D Imaging, an ETH spin-off medtech startup company based in Zurich, Switzerland. And we are revolutionizing medical imaging. Next slide, please. Right now, billions of hearts are beating all around the world at the same time under different conditions. And each one of us has our own unique heartbeat. And what do we want at the end of the day? To be healthy and active so that we can play with our grandchildren. However, it's not possible for so many of us because over 10 million people globally suffer from heart valve dysfunction. Every year, 500,000 patients undergo heart valve replacement operations and 1/3 do not show improvement, which means they live with severe lifestyle disruptions. 1/3, it's a huge pain, not only for patients, but also for physicians. Doctors still lack data to understand the true condition of a patient's heart before they operate. as cardiac planning is slow and manual today. Next, please. There is a need for more personalized care in the planning because one valve fits all is not sufficient. Next, please. I'm Dr. Utku Güden, CEO and co-founder, and this is why High-D Imaging was founded. Patient-centric treatment is future, and High-D Imaging is bringing future to the clinics today. Next, please. We help doctors create fast, accurate, and personalized cardiac planning within seconds with our advanced AI medical software. Next, please. Think about it. By seeing a patient's heart even before they operate, doctors can not only plan and predict their patient's outcome, but they can also dramatically lower the complications that patients experience after surgery. Next, please. Doctors now can assess patient-specific anatomy analysis, blood flow statistics, and device implantation parameters using directly CT or MRI data. We are experts in AI medical imaging. Our solution was built and improved for more than 14 years and combines in vitro imaging, fluid dynamics, and artificial intelligence. Our system is vendor agnostic, compatible with all CT and MRI scanners, fully automated, 30 times faster compared to the manual analysis, and it's easy to use. No training is needed. Next, please. We have ongoing clinical studies in Switzerland, and the preliminary results show that the in vitro-based blood flow prediction module show more than 90% agreement compared to the in vivo 4D MRI hemodynamics analysis. In 2021, we have signed up with 9 hospitals for beta testing with 3 paying customers across Europe and the US. And this is just the beginning. We plan to rapidly expand, reaching over 50 heart centers in the US this year. Next, please. As shown in our roadmap, we are developing 2 modules for heart valve replacement operation planning, namely anatomy and hemodynamics modules. In the coming years, we would like to expand our application range to congenital diseases, coronary diseases, and stroke risk assessment. We submitted our PCT filing and will initiate international patent filing in different jurisdictions in 2023. We expect to release our first product to the market by the end of this year after FDA approval. Since 2008, we have received around $1.4 million non-dilutive research grant and recently closed our pre-seed round. We will soon open our seed round, which will help us for US market entry. Next, please. During the course of 14 years, we published more than 40 publications in medical and engineering journals. Next, please. We are also part of different international accelerator and incubator programs in the US and Europe. Next, please. And finally, we will soon start our clinical studies with our clinical partners in the US and already have 2 ongoing clinical studies in Switzerland. Next, please. I'm honored to lead a fantastic team that accumulates over 50 years of experience in the fields of engineering, cardiovascular diseases, and business. We at High-D Imaging are determined to be the first to bring tomorrow's AI-based personalized treatment today to hospitals all around the world. Join us, our physicians, partners, and investors to save lives and make sure that every grandparent can play catch with their grandchild. Thank you very much.
I love it. Utku, thank you so much for being here tonight. And I love your wish. I'm with you, right? We want all the grandparents to be able to do whatever they want to do with their grandchildren. So that's fantastic. I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Kohli to start with our initial questions.
Utku, thank you so much for that presentation. And I can only imagine this type of a technology being applied not just to cardiology, but potentially other surgical planning as well, transplant, thoracic surgery, neurosurgery, so many different applications. So my main question for you is, how do you think this type of technology will compete with the current other competitors out there? For example, Siemens or GE, they each have their own proprietary technology. How would this be distinguished from those? How would it be a step above? And what would it add above those that already exist?
Absolutely. So what we are bringing to the market, which has never done before, is the predictive nature of our technology. So users can directly predict post-operational blood flow abnormalities before the actual operation within seconds. And this is our USP.
I have a couple of additional questions for you, and we're going to take some from the audience as well. But talk about, you mentioned you have some relationships with valve manufacturers. So talk about what you're doing with them.
Absolutely. So what we provide to our technology, not only to hospitals, but also industry, medical device manufacturers. So we test their new generation devices before they release them into the market. So it's like an R&D consultation for these companies. And we would like to keep this R&D part in the company in the coming years as well, because we would like to build a bridge between medical device manufacturers, physicians, and patients.
Sorry, I just had another follow-up question about validation of your predictive algorithm. So, how are you planning to validate that and study that when it comes out to market, or was it post-marketing, or?
So for our predictive module, we need more clinical studies. We need more data. We will have the parameters for the validation. The main purpose is to compare it with the 4D MRI based flow patterns. And then we will already performing in our clinical studies, and we'd like to expand the patient size with new clinical studies.
So you cut out there for a second, but you said you're going to compare it to the 4D MRI.
Correct.
As the comparator.
Correct.
Great. And a couple more from our audience here. One is, can we do valve intervention specific planning? I think this is a key piece, because my understanding is this is coming. Meaning, do you have a package for TAVR, TMVR, etc.?
Absolutely. Our initial application module is for TAVR applications, TAVR planning. But in the coming years, we will also introduce mitral and pulmonary valve planning as well.
Great. And maybe a little more explanation on what exactly the technology is doing. Are you post-processing CT images? Because it's not creating a new imaging device hardware, correct? Can you talk a little bit more about what it's actually doing?
Absolutely. So we are using regular CT images, and then from these CT data, we maximize information, meaning combining anatomy information and also predict blood flow patterns directly from the anatomy data. So of course, I can't reveal the secret sauce of our technology, but it's a combination of different state-of-the-art technologies, as I showed in my slides, basically.
Great. And I know our audience is going to want to ask more questions during our networking session, but Uku, thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it, and a lot of exciting technology here. I'm going to close us out. I first want to just give a big thanks to all three of our companies and our presenters, and to Dr. Payal Kohli. It was wonderful having you here tonight, and I loved your additions to the conversation. So we'll have you back again sometime, okay?
Definitely. It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you all. Congratulations on your companies, and I'm very excited to see where these companies will go.
Fantastic. So I'm going to give a couple more announcements, and then we're going to get you to the networking lounge. So you will get the opportunity again during that time to ask the additional questions that you didn't hear during the Q&A. And to enter one of those rooms, so there will be logos on the tables. To enter one of the rooms, you simply just click on the chair and it'll put you into a breakout room or a networking lounge. We will send follow-up communication and email with contact information to all of our presenters tonight, as well as links to the pitch videos for you to send on to others that may be interested in seeing what was presented tonight. We also have a Pitch Club LinkedIn group, and tonight's program will be loaded onto our AngelMD website at angelmd.com and our YouTube channel. As I mentioned at the start of the evening, the next Pitch Club is Tuesday, March 1st, and it is focused on innovations in radiology and interventional radiology, followed by March 15th with surgery and cardiothoracic surgery. Now, although those categories can be very broad, we do have a cardiac specific focus. So come back and learn more about those exciting companies as well. We will be also introducing a new feature coming up, which is super exciting, where you can subscribe and register for Pitch Club as a series. By registering, you will be automatically registered for each event, ensuring that if you cannot make it, you actually get all of the materials and the videos, even if you can't attend live. So we will send that information out to you as well. Big thanks to the AngelMD team tonight, and thanks for all of you in the audience for answering all the poll questions and giving feedback to all of our great presenters. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks from tonight.